On Saturday, the President of the United States said he would be forced to militarily complete the job. 48 hours later, his representatives were on a plane to Doha. The question is not only why the threats were made, the question is why the next move was not another strike, but a flight to Doha. Here is the sequence of events, as reported and confirmed through official statements. Friday, U.S. forces struck 4 Iranian military sites for the second consecutive day. Saturday morning, Iranian drones and missiles struck Kuwait and Bahrain. Both governments confirmed the attacks independently. Saturday, President Trump posted that if Iran did not stop, the United States would be forced to militarily complete the job. That phrase was among the strongest public threats of military escalation since the ceasefire began. Then, within that same 48-hour window, something else happened. Iran requested a meeting. According to officials who spoke to RFE/RL and CNN, the diplomatic request came from Tehran, not from Washington. The White House confirmed that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner would travel to Doha for high-level talks. Both sides signaled a pause in hostilities. Shipping data showed movement beginning to resume through the Strait of Hormuz within hours. One clarification worth making precisely, because coverage has not always made it clear. It was not the president who flew to Doha, it was his representatives. The threat was delivered publicly, directly by the principal. The de-escalation was being conducted through Witkoff and Kushner, acting as representatives rather than heads of state or officials with final treaty-making authority. That distinction matters. It raises the possibility of 2 tracks operating inside the same administration. One visible and confrontational, one quieter and diplomatic. Whether those 2 tracks are coordinated or reflect genuine internal disagreement about the right course of action is what this video investigates. Here is who is actually involved and what each side appears to want. President Trump made the public threat directly, through a social media post rather than a diplomatic or military channel. His political constraint is real. According to a Quinnipiac University poll released this week, 60% of American voters say the military action against Iran was not worth it. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are acting as representatives, not as heads of state, and not with independent authority to finalize terms. Their function is to negotiate and report back to Washington. Iran's foreign ministry requested the Doha meeting. That request suggests Tehran may have calculated that continued military exchange carried more risk than diplomatic engagement. The Revolutionary Guard appears to be maintaining a different public posture. A senior military advisor to Iran's supreme leader posted publicly that any further violation would bring what he called a swift and decisive response, even as the diplomatic channel was opening. That single fact may be one of the most important in this entire sequence. The foreign ministry is talking. The Revolutionary Guard is still issuing warnings. Those are 2 different parts of the same government, and their public messages do not currently appear fully aligned. Why Doha specifically? Qatar has spent over a decade building a role as a key regional mediator, not primarily through military or economic power, but through diplomatic relevance. It has hosted Taliban political talks. It has mediated exchanges between Hamas and Israel. Alongside Pakistan, it is now the venue for U.S.-Iran technical discussions. One plausible interpretation is that this is not simply geographic convenience. Qatar also hosts Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American military facility in the region. Hosting the talks while hosting U.S. forces represents a specific and difficult balancing position. There are at least 4 ways to interpret what happened between the threat and Doha. One interpretation: this was a genuine diplomatic opening. Iran requested the talks. Shipping data showed movement resuming. Both governments confirmed the process through official, on-record channels. A second interpretation: this reflects a pattern that has now repeated multiple times in this conflict. Threat, then talks, which may function as a recurring negotiating rhythm rather than a one-off response to this specific crisis. A third interpretation: the public threat was primarily a domestic political statement, aimed at an audience watching from Washington rather than from Tehran. A fourth interpretation: this is a temporary pause rather than a resolution. A dispute over mine clearance between Iran and France remains unresolved. Iran's deputy foreign minister publicly rejected French and Omani assistance this week, insisting Iran alone would conduct demining. The evidence does not clearly support one of these explanations over the others. Here is what can be stated with confidence and what cannot. What we know: public threats were made. Talks took place in Doha. Representatives traveled to Doha for confirmed talks. Tensions temporarily reduced, and shipping data reflected that reduction within hours. What we do not know: whether the threat and the diplomacy were coordinated in advance or developed along separate paths that happened to converge. Whether the de-escalation will hold beyond this week. Whether all factions inside Iran's government, the foreign ministry and the Revolutionary Guard among them, are working toward the same outcome. What the evidence does support is that whatever is happening in Doha exists alongside, not instead of, a parallel track that has not stood down. The cost of this uncertainty is not abstract. Industry groups have warned that disruptions to shipping through the strait could continue regardless of the outcome in Doha. Insurance premiums for transiting vessels remain elevated. The most important question may not be what was threatened. It may be what the existence of two simultaneous tracks, one public and confrontational, one quiet and diplomatic, reveals about how this conflict is actually being managed. History suggests that wars end not with a single decision, but with the slow alignment of multiple tracks toward the same outcome. Whether that alignment is happening now, or whether one track will eventually override the other, is what the coming days in Doha may begin to show. I'm the Anglosphere Report, the stories your local media won't connect. Tell me in the comments, do you think this was a coordinated pressure strategy or evidence of competing approaches inside the same system? See you tomorrow.